Hello together and welcome to my channel. So today we are here with Christoffer Døhlen for the second time. We had a very interesting conversation last week and we decided to meet again. So thank you for coming here, Christoffer, and please introduce yourself to my audience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amos. My name is Christoffer Døhlen in Norwegian, or Døhlen you might say in English. And I live here in Norway. I've done that my entire life. And I have my own YouTube channel, which is called Creative Christoffer, or Christoffer, Creative Christoffer. You can just find it by typing my name or Creative Christoffer in YouTube, and you'll find my stuff there. I'm currently studying economics at the University of Oslo, and I am generally interested in philosophy, politics, theology, and economics to a considerable degree.
Great. Of course, we will also put your link in the description so people can find you. Yes, so last time we were talking about basically about violence in society and about that each society has some fundamental set of values that is not optional. It is mandatory and it is defended through violence against everyone who does not want to follow this set of values. And so today we thought it would be interesting to talk about economics a little bit, about the distinction between capitalism and socialism, about economics. And maybe we will also come to talk about common goods versus private goods. So yes, why don't you take it from here, and what do you think about this general question?
Right, it's a very interesting one, and to some degree a very complicated matter, this thing about economics and how to organize resources in a society. So we generally are taught this idea that there is a dichotomy between capitalism and communism, and every society needs to have either one of them or a combination of both to some degree. And most economies are sort of mixed economies, so they have some elements of capitalism or free markets, or what many people call, and a degree of government interference. So I suppose we could start by defining terms. So when people speak of capitalism, what do they mean when they speak of capitalism? Well, to me, it seems that capitalism, essentially speaking, is this economic system where the means of production, capital goods, you can say, factories, machines, goods you use to produce further economic goods, that they are owned by people who have capital as a sum of money, you might say. So you have a group of people who we call capitalists, who have a set of money and they invest this money into these capital goods like machines and factories, and then they hire workers for a wage to work in those factories, and then they sell these consumer goods on the market. So I would say capitalism is essentially an economic hierarchy where we have capital owners investing their capital into machines, factories, and other means of production, hiring workers and paying them a wage, and then the final goods, the consumer goods, are put out in the marketplace and then bought by consumers. So that's the general idea. And then there might be different degrees of government interference with that system. Maybe the capital owners are subsidized by the government. Maybe it's a very voluntary free market system, but at least that's the crucial elements of capitalism. And then communism is sort of the what many consider the polar opposite of that. A system where you don't have a capital owners who are individually free to invest their own capital in machines and then buy and sell means of production on the market, but rather you have either the government or the idea of the collective as a whole owning the means of production as a community. There is no individual or private ownership, and there is no buying and selling machines or factories on the market. It's rather planned by the collective, and there is no wage labor. People are sort of participating in the means of production directly and the fruits of them, so there is no wage. So that's the general idea: capitalism and then communism. And libertarians, they like to support the idea of free market capitalism. This idea that we will have capital owners, have or entrepreneurs. They would like to emphasize entrepreneurs. Individuals should be completely free to invest whatever means they have into businesses and factories and machines, hire workers to whatever wage they want, and sell whatever kind of goods they want to the marketplace without any government interference. And then there you have this huge debate about, is this really a good system? Can this lead to monopoly or exploitation of workers? Would this lead to social inequality? Many people are concerned about, and therefore many would criticize free market capitalism and suggest some governmental interference. So that's the basic idea of the economy between capitalism and communism.
Yes, that's great. I really like that, to start with defining the terms, because yes, so we see that basically there is different forms of capitalism, as you pointed out, based upon how much government interference there is and what form the government interference takes. And then communism or yes, like what? Yes, socialism or communism is more, it's a completely different system. So it's not just a free market with government interfering, but there is actually no free market, or no, that's not quite true, but not in the primary stage of production. So because all the means of production are owned by the government or the collective, and it's actually very difficult to define means of production. That's one of the big problems with this system. But let's keep with it for a moment. So then, of course, also everything that comes out of the factory is in some way owned by the collective as a whole. And then it is distributed according to some different methods. So you could say one idea is from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. So everybody gets what he needs, which is again very difficult to define. But some people say, okay, if you're a grown-up man, you eat this much and you need some new clothes every half year. And if you have children, you need more, whatever. Or you could also then distribute it based on how much effort some guy put in. So maybe some guy works 10 hours at the collective factory and the other guy only 5. And so the first guy gets twice as much of the output. And then once this output then belongs to the individual, then there can still be a market. This doesn't have to be suppressed. Like in many communist states, it was repressed, but it doesn't have to be. There could be then also a market that, for example, I get some shoes out of the shoe factory, and then I can sell them and buy a boat or whatever, a computer or whatever I want. So there are some different options there, but.
And this critique is rather at the core of the socialist idea, I would say. We can't really classify workers to have one desire and one system they want to implement. Workers are different and have different preferences. So I agree with you there that we cannot really just assume that workers would demand all this democratic influence. Some people just don't want that.
Yes, I completely agree with this critique, I think it's very essential, and it's an error that many thinkers make, and it's an easy error to make. I guess sometimes I make it myself, that you assume that other people in some fundamental way are similar to yourself and want the same thing that you want, or hate the same thing that you hate. And as you said, some people will want to be involved in organizing the company for which they work, and others just want to get a paycheck and then, for example, go home and play the piano or play volleyball or do whatever they want or spend time with their kids.
Netflix,
like,
yeah.
Different people want different things, and sometimes it's hard for someone who really feels like he wants to organize how the company should be run so that it's just for everybody. He feels like this is a very fundamental desire, but it's not necessarily the case for everyone. So I think a good solution would not block the entrance into the organizational level for someone who really wants to get into the organization, but at the same time, it must have other options for people who have other desires. So in a good societal system, there must be many different paths that suit the desires and inclinations of all the people that live in this system. So yes, I think that's a very important critique on socialism generally, because, and on different other ideologies as well, like also the whole like the gender debate or the equality debate, like at the moment, for example, there are these ideologies that, for example, say like Blacks or Hispanics or Jews or homosexuals, they have been like somehow structurally repressed in society, and they want this and that, and they need a special voice or something. But to me, it's absolutely not clear that all Blacks or all Hispanics or all Jews want the same thing. It's the same critique. So yes, it's really problematic if you just put people into large groups and then only look at them in terms of which group they are in, because it's always, there is some truth in it, but it's always much too coarse. There is always a lot of information gets lost. Yes.
Exactly, and here I think we go to perhaps the core problem, philosophical problem with traditional socialism, especially Marxism. This idea that society must be reduced to classes and class conflicts, and that you determine what people want and desire and prefer based on which class they adhere to, and this is a very fundamental error, as Karl Marx and many other people have believed, that this idea that if you are a worker, you must think and act in a very specific manner because you're a worker, and if you are a capitalist, you must think and act in a very specific manner because you're a capitalist. So it denies this idea that people are different on many levels and for many reasons, and you cannot simply reduce human populations and societies to class A versus class B. It's very unrealistic and untenable, and this is sort of the core problem with socialism, because everything else in the socialist framework is built upon that idea that as soon as you get this class getting rid of the oppressor class, then you would have harmony and peace in society, as if all of the differences didn't exist and they would just be complete harmony. And as you mentioned, this idea that Marxist ideas and this class analysis have gotten into social values in general. that now people aren't just concerned about economic classes, but also pitting homosexuals against heterosexuals, blacks against whites, as if there are class lines there as well. And a very dangerous part of that is that Marxists and then their adherents, they analyze everything in society based upon classes. If a capitalist espouses this view or has this argument or this value, that must necessarily be capitalist propaganda. If you reject that idea, that must be because you belong to that class. And they judge everything based upon that. So when a Marxist is confronted with the fact that workers are different, they desire different things, some people just want a paycheck, other people may perhaps want to be entrepreneurs, I think the Marxists would be forced to explain that by saying, oh no, those workers who only want the paycheck, they are brainwashed by the capitalists at the school, and they must make up all these various weird explanations, ad hoc explanations, you could say, for facts which seem very logical to us. And that's the general problem. It tries to reduce everything to class conflicts, and when there are facts about reality that doesn't fit that worldview, then they need to come up with all these very strange explanations to make their worldview fit together.
Yes, exactly. It's I think that's exactly right what you pointed out here, that these kinds of theories can very quickly end up in a position where they argue that I know what you think and what you want and what you are actually after. And so if you say, look, I am a capitalist and I treat my workers well, then it's not true, because I know that you are just a money greedy pig and you are only saying this to look nice so that you can keep in your position of exploiting people. So, and from this position, it's actually impossible to have a dialogue with someone, or to understand the other person, or even to cooperate or to work towards a peace or a mutually beneficial state of society. Because there is just group A and they want this, and there is group B and they want that. And it doesn't matter what they say or do, because my model is already fixed.
That's a good point. And also, when you look at the history of socialism and communism, as we both know, that history hasn't been very pleasant, to say the very least. And of course, Marxists and many socialists would believe that when this class of people get to power and throw out the capitalist class, then all the problems associated with the previous system, they will just evaporate or something. And then you see that reality doesn't work that way, because you have, for instance, the general desire for power over others, which can be intensified once you have a governmental position, and you use the Marxist framework to justify lots of terrible things, just as you saw in the Soviet Union and China, etc. And here I think we come to another very important critique to hardcore socialism or communism. This idea that if you're going to have a new system which is going to completely reorganize everything in society, every aspect of life, economic, social, cultural, political, moral, everything is going to be reorganized because the class structure is now replaced by the dictatorship of the proletariat. Given that people have this tendency to justify power and greed, and this tendency wouldn't just disappear once you have some people getting into power in the name of Marxism. Based on this Marxist framework, they can commit horrendous crimes, because now you have the idea that everything needs to be reorganized based on this Marxist framework. Everything, social, political, cultural, economic. So all, you could say, traditional intuitions about society and economics, etc., they needs to be doubted. and violations of basic moral principles can now be doubted because they were simply old class instincts. And that's why I would say that the developments in the communist countries such as Cuba and China and the Soviet Union, they aren't simply accidental developments. It's not like, oh, it would work if only Lenin didn't exist, or if Stalin was replaced by Trotsky or something. It's not like, oh, if only we had these circumstances, then it would work well. Rather, I would say that such a tyrannical system of totalitarian governments would be a necessary development based on this Marxist framework. Because when you have this idea that you need an institution to reorganize everything in the name of the new class, then necessarily it would follow from that you would need to have an elite of bureaucrats, which will completely eradicate the old system to replace it with the new. So this idea that socialism or hardcore Marxism, communism can happen in a very peaceful manner without having a very centralized government, I think that's very, very impractical.
Yes, I mean, one really important thing that you mentioned here, or yes, is this idea that if only we can get rid of the evil capitalists, then the world will become a paradise. And this idea is deeply, deeply flawed. And we have seen this also before in history. I was just thinking as you were talking, if only we can get rid of this evil monarchy, then the world will become a paradise. But it didn't. And if only we can get rid of this, I don't know, conflict of like religious wars all the time by separating the church and the state, then the world will become a paradise. But no, it won't. And so the thing to notice here, and I think this is something that is still in our current society, very few people have realized this, that evil is inside of everyone. There is good and evil inside of everyone. And that means there will never be a state of perfect utopia where nothing can go wrong anymore and it's just like paradise from here until the end of time. Because even if you change this system that we have right now, where some people have a lot of power and sometimes abuse it, then other organizations will follow, and in these organizations other people will have positions of power and will be tempted to abuse their power again. So it's always a problem that people with power are tempted to abuse their power. And so we should keep this in mind when we talk about how society should be organized.
Exactly. So I think we could say that a very huge problem with socialism is its false view on anthropology, this false view of human nature and how human beings interact and what they desire and prefer, etc. And the idea of human perfectibility, that you can make human beings perfect if only you have the right economic institutions, etc. And also I think this is an error to some degree in the dominant liberal philosophy or social liberal philosophy of the day as well, because many adherents to liberalism seems to think that we can achieve human utopia in a certain sense if we get the right amount of technology and material progress, etc., that we have this fantastic development going toward a better and better society for everyone. For instance, Fukuyama wrote a book, The End of History, in the 1990s, where he argued for this idea that society, because of liberal progress and technological progress, will just lead to better and better conditions for humanity, and therefore humans will be better themselves. I just see that that's also a fallacious view of humanity, that you have this, rather you have this inherent nature within us, which includes the tendency to be greedy or violent, as we mentioned last time, or have false desires, etc. So when we are going to have a society, we need to take that into account. We need to take the flawed human nature into account, and that humans cannot be perfected. We just have to live with that and recognize that when we are going to change society, for instance.
Yes, yes, I truly believe this is an important point that you mentioned here. It's the same fallacy, just in a different form.
Yes.
And also, some people also have the same belief with education. They believe that every evil that happens in the world is just an effect of lack of education. And if we could just bring good schooling and good education to all people, then everybody would become peaceful and wonderful. And I think it's just another variant of the same fallacy. And I can understand why people tend towards such explanations, because it's like, it's an easy way out. You can do something in the outside world. You can work or build technology or kill some other people or build a school, and then everything will become all right. And you never have to confront the dark part within yourself and see what you have also, or I have, everybody I think has some dark desires and some dark motivations, like take something at the expense of someone else, or I see a woman and I think she's attractive, so I just want to take her, or I don't want to work, I just want other people to work so that I can do whatever I want and have whatever I have. And there is this part in people, and I think it makes also sense from an evolutionary point of view, that if you can gain something at the expense of some other creature, then evolutionary speaking, this is an advantage. So I think all of these strategies that we have now mentioned, they are ways to try to evade this very difficult realization and very difficult path to really see the dark and the evil inside yourself also.
Right, exactly, and it is a bit frustrating to see that that people still today divide groups into class conflicts, even though it's very obvious that there are many factors at play here. For instance, the gender pay gap, as still many socialists here in Norway and at the rest of the world talk about how women are oppressed because they only earn 70 cents of the dollar compared to men, etc. Even though it has been explained so many times that there are many reasons why women generally, statistically speaking, earn less than men. It has to do with what kind of job they are occupied with, what kind of situation they are in. There can be simply accidental circumstances. There are so many factors at play here. But still, there are people who just ignore that and reduce the whole situation into oppressor versus oppressed, and that's a very difficult problem to deal with that, because it's so massive. Even though there has been people debunking this narrative for so long, there are still people who really passionately defend this kind of thinking. So that's a dilemma, how we're going to solve that. And then of course you have other kinds of group like extreme nationalists or racists talking about how race is everything, which are also creating huge problems on that side. So I suppose that anthropology, the view about human nature, human identity, it's really important to get that right, because if you get that view wrong, that has very dangerous implications, as we have seen throughout history.
Yes, I think that's a good point. And I think it's to some extent the problem with this way of looking at the world, just reducing what you see immediately to two groups which are hostile to each other, and one is either oppressing the other or the other way around. The first thing is it's very easy. It doesn't require a lot of work, a lot of intellectual work and research and thinking about how things interact. It's just straightforward. You have your answer out of the box. And the second thing is, since you mentioned anthropology or human nature, I think one, to my mind, problematic tendency that is very, I think, a part of human nature is, first of all, the desire to belong to a group, and then almost in the same step, the distancing my group from the other groups. It is this kind of groupthink, or like in, how do you call this, like that is bigger than a family, like a clan. Yes. So some I think, evolutionarily speaking, there was a long time where human beings, or the pre-stage of human beings, they lived in clans, and these clans lived on territories, and they were hostile towards each other. Each clan tried to get bigger at the expense of the territory of the other clan. And so this way of seeing the world is very much ingrained in our mind, and it's somehow easy, and it comes naturally. And it is a big problem when people just see the world like this without reflecting critically about it. Then there are a lot of problems.
Yes, there certainly are. And I suppose to get back at the dichotomy between capitalism and communism in that regard, so we could therefore conclude that markets and private property and businesses, and a certain sense of division of labor, that some people are workers who just want a paycheck, other people want to become entrepreneurs, so they might be involved in that. Some people want to be capital owners, others want to have a different condition. This means that capitalism, to some extent, is a good thing, or a natural thing, you could say. That markets, private property, businesses, etc., that is in accordance with human nature. But when you isolate it to the extreme, then you ignore, as you said, those other factors which are at play. If you only focus at the business and material goods to make individual pleasure, as the liberal philosophy goes toward, or at the other extreme, you have communism and Marxism reducing everything to classes. So I suppose we could therefore conclude that communism is not desirable at all, because it contradicts human nature and has economic problems. And we do want some a considerable extent of economic liberty, private property, and markets and business freedom. But that needs to be, as you said, balanced with other important aspects of human society and human nature. So when we are going to figure out what kind of society is desirable, we need to find this balance to make a harmony between all the different aspects of human nature.
Yes, I think that's a good summary, and maybe we can already take this as the topic for our next conversation, which is a topic that I find very interesting at the moment. What are these aspects of human nature that are like at the basis, that are really fundamental, and then how can they be balanced against each other?
Yes.
So, yes.
That's a very, very good point, because to understand society and what society should be, we need to go to the depth about humanity or human beings and look at what we people are and what we do and our essence. If we don't get that right, we're going to get a lot of other things wrong. So I completely agree there.
Yes, so I think that's great. I think we have now like 50 minutes, so it's a good time to conclude for today. I mean, we will probably never be done with the interesting topics, but that's great. So yes, maybe next time we can talk about this, about what are like really fundamental cornerstones of human nature, and then we will see where this question leads us.
Yes, absolutely. And I also mentioned that if anyone in the audience have some thoughts and considerations about what we talked about today, please free to suggest some further thoughts on there in the comment section.
Yes, or also suggestions for topics that we should talk about.
Yes.
So yes, so I thank you very much for being a guest on my channel and for this very interesting conversation. And then we will see each other again in another video.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for a very interesting discussion.
Great. So see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.